So, a quick bit of history. How many of you were here or in some version of the Credo talks in the summer where we presented the thinking where it had got to at that point? Okay, so there's just a brief recap on that to show you why we're not doing this anymore. But what we presented then was to say the intention was to present the new curriculum directory largely around the four-cornered structure that had existed in both curriculum directories before that, in 2012 and 96, and in a document before that even called What We Ought to Teach, around the four constitutions of the Second Vatican Council. But roughly that was slightly misleading. It wasn't about the contents of those documents. It was using those documents as kind of placeholders for a set of content that we wanted to cover, which broadly went along Revelation, Church, Celebration, Sacraments, and Living a Life in Christ. So that was the kind of four-cornered approach. At that point in the summer, I presented you with the idea we break down those curriculum foundations into broad areas of study, and that each of those broad areas of study we would break further down into focused components of study, and we would repeat that for each of the four corners. I didn't bother making the slides then, and I'm glad I didn't, because they take ages to make. But that we would do the equal kind of fanning down, breaking down in each of the corner, and then we would take these focused components of study and turn them into age-related topics of study, something like this, but this was speculative then, and just to show you how you could break it down in terms of steps that you could go through at different curriculum levels to lead you to a full account of that corner of the curriculum that we wanted people to cover. And then we thought you could take these age-related topics of study and produce what primary school teachers had anyway had asked us and made clear in the survey that they wanted, which was some kind of presentation of age-related expectations, which are presented in an outcomes-type language that they could use in school to prepare lessons, but also to assess against. So if we were to do that, we could have then presented a page that looked something like this, along the lines of the language that's now used in school. And we could contextualize it, what it builds on, what it leads onto, what it connects with either side, and then incorporate the standards document. I don't know how many of you are familiar with this, but some of you definitely will be. The levels of attainment that the bishops published was a NIBRE document that the bishops published and was incorporated in the 2012 document. That is the way in which we've assessed religious education up until now. There's a document called the standards document, which was meant to be an evolution of the levels document to help people in the context of the new landscape, which is not assessing according to a level structure, which was a national curriculum methodology that's been superseded now. So schools were saying we need to keep up with the pace if we want to be taken seriously as a curriculum subject. We need to make sure we're not assessing in a way that nobody else is any longer using. So that was the challenge. So we have the standards document that tries to break down that language. It's an evolution of the levels of attainment, but presented us with 3 attainment targets. The first one is about knowledge and understanding, using those kind of skill words. The second attainment target was about engaging and responding. And the third attainment target was a new one that hadn't been there before, but which secondary schools recognised as a feature of religious education in secondary school, which was evaluating and analysing. That were the kind of skill areas in the standards. And we thought we could take that skill language that is present in the driver words and the levels and incorporate it in the standards, and we could map out the content on kind of a double page spread that looked something like that. My sense was when we tested this in the summer with everybody, people liked the idea of a nice presentation on a 2-page spread that made sense. And they thought, yeah, we like the look of that. That looks nice. It looks like something we could use. But if you got one of them for every one of them, which is only one of them, which is one of them, which is one of those, and one of those, that would be a document that ends up being about 5,000 pages long. And that would be unwritable in the time we've got. And secondly, I think the amount of prescription would be undesirable from the school's perspective. So we thought we've got to do better. And primary schools wanted more clarity and detail. Secondary schools wanted more flexibility and freedom from the survey. And I think that level of prescription was... So the first critique that we received in the summer was from teachers saying that's going to be too prescriptive and it's going to be too fast. It's going to, in fact, be undeliverable. It's not going to be possible to do if you break it down like that. The second critique came from, there's a small academic symposium that got together as well, said if you present the content like that, the way in which you've chosen to present the content becomes a tacit part of the content. It suggests that a religious life, a Catholic understanding of the world, a Catholic way a way of understanding Catholicism is boxed off into those 4 corners. And in fact, that's not the real experience of anybody who is a Catholic and has lived their life as a Catholic. They're not ghettoised like that. They're more seamlessly connected than that. They're integrated. So we feared that people would think that these were 25% of the curriculum each and you have to do them separately. A bit like, if you remember around the GCSE, those of you who are secondary school, the DFE produced a four-corner document of beliefs and teachings, practices, sources and forms of expression. And one of the boards, ATCRE, took that four corners and presented four corners, and everyone examines it in that order. But ATCRE and ATCRE took the model and threw it up and rearranged it. So we were fearful about the risk of that it might lead to somehow hard walls existing between these areas of study that wouldn't faithfully reflect what we mean by Catholic understanding of reality. And then the third one, which has come up a lot today, was the importance of being able to tell a story about why our curriculum content or curriculum document has the shape that it does. I've got a new quotation from Mary Mightman we're going to try and track down, which was that one from Daniel Willingham that says, story, our brain's privileged story. I think it said something like that. I had another couple of good quotes anyway, one from Chesterton. I've always felt that life is first a story, and if there is a story, there is a storyteller. And another one from a Catholic theologian who talks about at the centre of all our religious education, of all our theology, is the story of the life, death and resurrection of Jesus Christ. Fundamental to us as a people is the telling of this story to ourselves. And we tell it to ourselves every year through the liturgical cycle that we experience as worshipping members of our community. So we thought we do have a really good story that we could use as the basis. We have the story that we could use as a way of presenting the curriculum content. So we've been playing with this, and it keeps changing every time we present it because everyone has a different view on things. And we need to get past this. But this is where it's got to right now. And we're trying to present it in chunks that would be divisible by 6. Because the other problem with 4 things is you've got 6 half terms, not 4 terms or 4 half terms. So it'd be useful if we could present it in kind of 6 chunks. And we think we've got a kind of natural rhythm to the school year that makes sense in terms of the story of salvation. So if we take it first, we could have an in the beginning curriculum slice that deals with God, first of all, as a theological concept, but then also the theological concept of creation and of Imago Dei that would sit within that curriculum slice. We could then move into what becomes the lead up to Christmas, but it could be our Advent term where we look at the Old Testament precursors to the coming of Christ. Particularly the advisor team was interested in the theological concepts of covenant and prophecy. And then the third slice would be about the life of Jesus from Galilee to Jerusalem, Jesus' life and ministry, what he did, what he said, what he taught. And then the fourth slice would be in the Lenten half term, if we present it in this order, which would look at the passion, death and resurrection of Jesus. And then the Holy Spirit and the establishment of the church and the nature of the church itself as a theological concept. And then a broad catch-all header, Life and Full, about what it means for us now, but also what it might mean in the light of the judgment at the end of time. So living well and the last things. So that's kind of the shape. And the idea about presenting it in this order is if we present it like this, it gives us this kind of elegance in terms of presenting a curriculum, and we're challenged by us to present a curriculum that makes sense sequentially and progressively. So if we present it like this, we've got a natural sequence, which is a narrative sequence, privileging story as the means by which we communicate what it is we want to communicate. And the story is being told, and we tell it to ourselves every year. So you tell the story in sequence, picking out what you want from those theological concepts at given ages. And then it repeats, the cycle repeats, so that you get, as well as a sequence narrative, a progressive narrative that you can build on as you go through the school year. And so I'll do this a bit quickly, but part of this just wants to show you how good I am at PowerPoint. But it helps. And I think there might also be something important. People seem to like the fact that it could be presented in a colourful curriculum spiral. That in itself is an appealing thing, it seems. So that would repeat. So we then get a curriculum that is both sequential and progressive across the school years. That's the ambition. And there still remain questions, of course, because lots of people are asking, this looks more like a scheme of work than a curriculum director historically did. And I appreciate these are fluid categories, I suppose, and we're still trying to figure out where the line is and what it might mean for us. But it would be sequential because the narrative makes sense in this sequential order, and it would be progressive because as you go through the years, you're building upon your conceptual understanding as you move through. We still, of course, need to make sure that we're covering what the four corners asked of us, that we need to understand what Revelation has to say in terms of these theological concepts, what it means for the community of the church to which we belong, what it means for how we worship as a community, what it means for the life that we live in our dialogue with others. So we still need to make sure that when we present the content, we have that woven through the narrative presentation of the content. And the second challenge is this. The AT language that I talked about, I think is perhaps not as helpful as it could be. And this is a second set of thoughts, and these are the most novel and most recent. But there is another syllabus out there that's become a little bit of a source of inspiration. It's not a Catholic syllabus, but in Anglican schools, they've done a huge project in the last few years called Understanding Christianity, in response to an Ofsted critique that the theological literacy in Anglican schools was poor, and that they weren't teaching students in Anglican schools about Christianity. So, Understanding Christianity, if you get a chance to go on their training, it's really worth it, because for a start, the resources are excellent, and they spend a long time on them. But their equivalent of what we call standards, they call elements. And there are two things I like about them straight away. First of all, I like the fact that they're kind of progressive, their language of progression is a set of verbal phrases, not a set of ATs. I think that's something more intuitive if we can get that right. I also like the way they've got a simple icon that represents each of these lenses through which you look at the material, and therefore when you present the outcome statements, you've got a little icon next to each of the icons. And they've done some really good research on this now. It's been piloted and it's been used now in lots and lots of Anglican schools, and it's been very, very warmly received. Teachers love using it. It's very straightforward to use, but it's also building in some really important skills that we've perhaps neglected. Making sense of the text is where they say it's really important to help students know how to understand and read the texts of the tradition. We're very good at teaching them how to argue for and against. We're not very good at all at helping them dig more deeply into the meaning of these texts, and that's something that resource is very good at. So then we've kind of played around with this a little bit, thinking if we're going to lay out the pages around these kind of sense of skills that we're going to apply to the knowledge, what might we call it, what icons might we use. These are the latest, but they've already been criticised, but just leave it on the board there. So we're looking for discovering or investigating the meaning of things, beliefs, by sources, by the way, that's probably secular curriculum language, because we only have one source in our church documents. There's one source. It's Jesus Christ, the God who reveals. But we do have the different streams through which that source is communicated to us in De Verbum, which is scripture and tradition as interpreted by the magisterium. That's what we mean by sources. Sources is not the right word, but it's the most widely understood word. And then practices our worship and how we live our lives. So there we would be looking at building knowledge cumulatively and understanding cumulatively. They'd be making links between these different areas. We do this because we believe that, and because God has revealed this to us in this place. And then this orange skill. Well, by the time we get to secondary school, that has to be about critical evaluation and the weighing of strengths and weaknesses of arguments. But we need to understand what it might mean in primary school to prepare for that. So we don't think we've got this right yet, but we're trying to explore what it might mean to help younger pupils to explore the areas that there might be areas of disagreement that they have to try and immerse themselves in. And the third one is making sure that we create space in the classroom for formation, for spiritual development, that we're saying we have to create space for those pupils to imagine what might it mean for me, and what difference will it make to my life and to the world if we accept the truth of these things. So those are imperfect. Some people love imagining, some people hate it, so it might depend where you're coming from. So an alternative would be discovering, exploring, reflecting. But another, and I don't know who mentioned this today, but it stuck in my head, another pedagogy or another lens through which you might look at the material might be through the language of head, heart and hands. Through what does it mean? what does it mean to me, and what difference does it make? How does it connect to the world? So that's another way of thinking. That's where we've got to, but we mustn't forget that we do have a responsibility to teach other religions as well, so we don't want to teach them under any Christian category headers. That would be a mistake from both sides. So we need to think about that too, and how we present that, and how we make it clear how much and which that the bishops expect us to teach in religious education. So that's where we've got to, but quite a lot's still up in the air, and we haven't made as much progress as I would have liked, because we wanted to have tried and populate some of the core knowledge which would fill these curriculum slices, but we're going to do that very soon. So the ATCRE teacher conference, the teacher consultation group, is going to help us with some of that work. But there will be some Cradle Days in the summer again, where we share our progress on that. So please, if you look out for those, please come to them. And we've got we're trying to set up 4 regional pupil consultation events as well. So there's definitely going to be one in Birmingham, there's definitely going to be one in Liverpool. We're still looking, Mary, for a southeastern one and a southwest one.